head out in the car, maybe to the shops or to pick the children up from school, where do you park it? The Department for Infrastructure and IMTAC, that's the Inclusive Mobility and Transport Advisory Committee, have started a campaign urging people to think before they park. It's an attempt to cut down on pavement parking. The Minister, Nicola Mallon, says that while drivers think they're doing the right thing by keeping the road clear, they're actually putting more vulnerable people, such as elderly people, those with young children, anyone with a disability, in danger. Now, the campaign got us thinking, though, and we wondered what else has changed for people with specific needs as a result of the pandemic. Dermot Devlin lives with a rare genetic condition which restricts his growth and breathing. He uses a wheelchair to get around. Diane Marks is blind. When she goes out, she goes with her guide dog. They're both with us this morning. Dermot and Diane, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning, Will.
Dermot, this can be frustrating and infuriating, but if you're having difficulty negotiating round a car parked on the pavement, for you it could be very, very dangerous.
It has been very dangerous, and obviously with me being a wheelchair user and just being over 3 foot tall, if a car parks on a pavement or footpath, and I can't now get around it, then it forces me to go onto the road to get round the vehicle. Now, obviously, with being just 3 foot tall, it's very hard to see if there's any traffic coming in my direction. So I sort of, and if it's a very busy road, which has happened to me on numerous occasions, you're taking a very dangerous risk in doing that. And that's what happens when people park their cars and vehicles. They're putting people like myself and Diane and other deaf and disabled people in danger by forcing us onto the road.
You can often see quite a difference between a lot less space, frankly, sometimes on rural roads and in more isolated areas. You can get a little more space on a pavement in a town or a city, but that doesn't really excuse it, does it?
No, unfortunately not. People think that, that I often hear excuses, well, I'm just popping into the shop for 2 minutes, or, it's raining, I don't want to get my hair wet, coming out of barbers or hairdressers or anything like that there. So people have ready-made excuses, but unfortunately it's not good enough, and that's whether it's in a town or city situation or indeed, as you say, in a rural country situation as well.
Dermot, stay with us. Diane, who are the culprits whenever you get parking problems and you and your dog have to do a bit of complicated negotiation around something?
It's anybody who drives a vehicle, really. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a delivery vehicle, whether it's a private motorist. It doesn't matter who it is. It's whoever parks their wheels up on that pavement.
How much of a job have you had to do, for example, to politely educate your own neighbours?
Well, they seem to be pretty good, actually, which is quite astonishing. But it's more a case of when I'm actually in the city centre. I go in twice a week because I work full time, and I'm in the office, and I'm having to navigate vehicles parked either 2 wheels on or fully on the pavement just to get to work, and it's an absolute nightmare.
Now, your dog, you haven't told us your dog's name yet.
It's Morris.
Right, Morris. Big help, presumably, trained to be an obstacle avoider, so he knows about vehicles and bins and bushes and crossings and things. He knows about curbs, but even so, it's a lot for a dog to work out, never mind any of the rest of us.
Absolutely, and this is why it's actually called a working partnership, because it's between him and I that we determine whether we can navigate that narrow space between the vehicle and the building line or the nearest bush safely. And if he says, no, I don't think this is possible, he will take me out into the road to get round that vehicle, and that puts me even more in danger.
Well, we've had a good think about cars and footpaths there, the three of us, and I think that's everybody who has parked and thought on occasion on a narrow street, I wonder how I can help keep the car out of the road for 5 minutes. Makes us think twice, so that can only be to the good. Dermot, I mean, there's more than just parked cars have been interesting and difficult and a challenge to you during COVID, simply because in the early days when you were going out to the shops and doing what you had to do, the whole social contract of how we interacted with each other had changed. What did you notice whenever the pandemic hit?
Well, when the pandemic hit, I isolated, so I wasn't really out for a long time. It's only the last few months that I've sort of began to slowly get myself out into the streets again and sort of interacting a little bit more. But I've noticed now that people think that just because things are starting to relax, that it's that the pandemic is gone or the virus is gone and things are back to normal. So I sort of have to make my own judgment when I want to go to shops. For example, there's many occasions where I would go to different shops and towns and that, or see people congregating in the shop door and wouldn't be wearing masks and all talking. And then and sort of saying to myself, do I want to get near that? And then even when I do go into the shops, there's some people maybe wandering around the shop, quite a high majority, that can maybe go around the shop not wearing face masks, not washing, cleaning their hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, you can't make a rash judgment because some people are obviously, due to medical reasons, maybe exempt from wearing masks. But I just think that the numbers that I'm seeing, sort of goes beyond that number. So I sort of have to judge myself whether it's right for my own personal experience, because not only am I scared of contracting the virus myself, but I'm also equally scared of maybe passing it on to somebody else that maybe would be vulnerable as well. A CEV, a clinically extremely vulnerable person.
Mm. And one very practical thing, a shop will do, because it's the law, they'll put out hand sanitizer for people so they can clean their hands. You mentioned your height when you're in the chair too. Sometimes you can't reach hand sanitizer because it didn't occur to people maybe not to put it in something high up.
Unfortunately not nowadays. Sometimes they are too high up, and sometimes they have maybe an object in front of them, which means that my wheelchair can't get up close to get to it. And some of them now you can put your hand under and it dispenses the sanitizer automatically, but sometimes you have to push it, and it's not very practical for me as a wheelchair user. But I quickly learned about that, so I bring my own now in my pocket. But it just, as you say, it highlight maybe a blind spot within shops and retailers that they didn't think about, disabled people or deaf and disabled people coming in to the premises. They were just thinking of non-disabled people. So I think they really need to look at this again, and especially in some of the bigger shops.
One thing that, Diane, I want to raise about the hand sanitizer is you've got Morris with you. People, sometimes it comes out automatically, as Dermot said. Sometimes you press it. It can be on the floor. And you don't want the dog going near the hand sanitizer, do you?
No, well, it's actually more a case of that he won't actually go near the hand sanitizer when it's in the shop, whether it's on the floor, on the wall, wherever it is. The biggest problem with hand sanitizers, and this goes for any dog owner, is that you are allowing your dog to lick your hands, and that's actually toxic to all dogs. So
Really?
If your dog is constantly licking your hands, or, when you get home and your dog licks your hands, for whatever reason, it actually puts your dog's health at risk. Hence why I carry non-alcoholic based sanitizer in my pocket.
So it's interesting that you've both had to make changes to deal with things yourselves. Very sensible and very practical. And just because, again, I don't think there's ever a willful cause in most cases to be difficult to you. It just stuff hasn't occurred to people. Did you notice people behave differently towards Morris when you first went out with them in the pandemic? Because back then we weren't sure who or what carried the virus.
I had an incident, I'm not going to name the store that it happened in, but we met a lady, both my partner and I are totally blind, we both have guide dogs, and we were doing a bit of shopping and following the assistant round, and a lady said, "Oh look, there's guide dogs," and we said, "Well look, you're more than welcome to come over and say hello." And she turned round and the first words out of her mouth was, no, I don't touch dogs, they carry the virus."
Really?
And the ignorance just left us cold. Absolutely speechless. We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Could not believe it.
Let's go to one other area as well. People have been doing an awful lot more online since the pandemic, and public online services, therefore, are meant to be 100% accessible. Have you found that?
No, absolutely not. I don't know if Dermot wants to say anything.
Dermot, how have you found the whole online experience? We'll come back to Diane in a second then.
Well, I would be quite regularly online. For myself, it works for the best, but, for other cases, it won't work for the deaf and disabled people. to do with the right colour contrast, that people with visual impairments and that, or blind people wouldn't be able to read things like that. Their websites aren't, some people build their website, but it's not built to standard. And then there's, one thing that's very important is always seem to be overlooked by web designers and people who update the website. It's putting in meta tags and image descriptions and stuff like that. So because some people, won't be able to see what picture you have up or what video you have up.
Yes,
so
of course.
They need that description to let them know what's happening or what image is, because there's no point putting up a nice image when, a certain percentage of the population can't see it and don't know what you're trying to portray in your articles online.
Yes, that must be very important to you, Diane, to actually to know what it is some of the text is referring to.
Absolutely, but it's not even so much the fact that there are, for example, images on screen that aren't labelled properly or the description is not fully available. But it's even when the pandemic first hit and you had big supermarkets rushing to get their websites and to get vulnerable people classed as priority for deliveries. And let's just say there was a major fight between the visually impaired community and supermarkets because they didn't see visually impaired people as priority. And it was a huge push from us to try and get them to realise that actually we're still classed as vulnerable even though we may not come across as such.
Is it wearying having to fight those battles time and time again to try and say, look, we're only doing the crime here of existing and therefore could you at least try and think of ways to help us and make things work for us?
Absolutely. Every day I seem to be fighting the same issues constantly, whether it's a case of booking for my flu vaccine because I work for the health service, or whether it was even trying to log on and book for the COVID boosters COVID jabs when they first became available. I had to actually ask for assistance of sighted people. I shouldn't have to do that.
And yet you've done it when you've had to. You've both adapted to the way that things have changed. I think we owe you both a debt of thanks this morning, both you, Diane and Dermot, just for explaining about how to think of things a little differently, just how to think about where we park, think about the services we provide, and just look to the citizens in our midst. Thank you both for explaining your situation. Dermot Devlin and Diane Marks there. We've had a couple of texts